Hello everyone. Welcome back to another episode of r/malicious compliance. In today's episode, okay, Karen, be careful what you ask for. Have a staff meeting knowing I can't attend and give me the worst shift possible. Then I'll quit, but I won't notify you. I'm not interviewing, I work here. Before we get started, be sure to subscribe so that you will never miss a video. Let's get started. Okay, Karen, be careful what you ask for. It's funny how a song can trigger a memory. This morning, when I drove my kids to school, the song This Old Heart of Mine by Rod Stewart and Ronald Isley started playing. Remember this for later. Also, remember this was the late 1990s/early 2000s. So although cell phones were popular, it was a far cry from what we have today. If someone was needed, we had to call their pager and wait for a call back. About 20 years ago, after my husband and moved to a different state from where we were both born and raised. The move was for his job, so rather than pursue a job in my regular field, I found a temp to hire job in a regular office. When I went for the interview, it turned out that my soon-to-be boss grew up one town over from me. So rather than a usual half-hour interview, it turned into over an hour of chatting about our sports team back home, the differences between the states, etc. Karen, the second in command, sat through the interview and looked bored. She loudly yawned and stretched her arms, despite the fact that boss and I didn't realize how bothered she was. She had a Karen haircut before it was popular. By the time I got back to our apartment, just minutes away, the temp agency called and said that the company wanted me and was willing to but the rest of the contract I had with the temp place in order to make sure I worked with them. As it turned out, I was taking Karen's old job. She got a promotion, so you would think that everything would be cool. I was wrong. While Karen wasn't my boss in any way, shape or form, and had no supervisory power over me, she let it be known that I was the newbie in the office. She was hired only 6 months earlier, so she was a newbie herself. Karen was known to be a pest in the office. Nothing major, but she would do petty things that would bother people. She would make microwave popcorn and leave the bag in for 5 minutes, making the entire floor smell horrible. She would listen to her voicemails on speaker, even when she was sitting with her hands idle. During that time, I thought I was pregnant and had to schedule a doctor's appointment. Although it would have been a welcome surprise, hubby and I were married for just a few months. It turned out the stress of moving and being a newlywed got to me, and my schedule was off. I wasn't pregnant during that time, just stressed. Karen overheard my conversation with setting up the appointment and reminded me that while I was at work, I was on company time and wasn't allowed to make personal calls. Fans of The Office will understand this. The floor plan was just like Dunder Mifflin, very open, and you could hear everyone's conversation during the day. It became a usual din of white noise, with everyone talking quietly. Basic common sense. Boss was fantastic. He had a great sense of humor and was super friendly. I remember one day, I walked back to my cube from the fax machine. He cranked up the small radio he had in his corner cube. This Old Heart of Mine rang throughout the office, and as he turned around, he saw me, then took me in his arms and we danced. He twirled me around, I laughed, and a few others in the office tapped their foot or did a little dance in their chair. I can't tell you how excellent the people in the office were, except Karen. After the dance with my boss, she walked up to me while I was at the coffee maker. She went on to tell me that what boss did was completely inappropriate, and I could sue for sexual harassment. I rolled my eyes and told her to lighten up. Boss was in his late 60s and would always talk about his grandchild. He was the kind of boss that everyone would want to have. Karen would often go to meetings in another part of the floor. Since she was somewhat close to my cube, every second she was away was heaven. In the meetings she would leave her pager on her desk, as any matters could have been handled right then and there. Fast forward a few months, and both she and I were settled in our new jobs. Soon she became distracted because she and her husband were set to buy their first home. During this time, it was a seller's market, meaning that properties were scarce and anything that came on the market sold at or way above the asking price. My husband worked with someone who paid $50,000 above the asking price. The dream home that Karen and her husband wanted was a 4-bedroom, 3-bath house on 1 acre of land, just on the outskirts of town. Karen made good money, as did her hubby, so the sale would be based on both incomes. Soon, Karen thought that my role in the office was her private secretary. I wasn't, but what was once in a while can you do me a huge favor and fax this, turned into a demand of do this now. After the first few times of nicely asking me to fax something, She would ask me for the confirmation report. Although I was clearly busy with my heaps of paperwork, I'd look through the pile of piles and find what she needed. Soon, even when she could see I was busy and we had an office secretary whose job it was to fax for others, etc., Karen demanded that I do it. She was tired about not getting an immediate response to when the fax went through. She insisted that I not only do the clerk work that wasn't part of my job, but I let her know what I do, every step of the way. Every step of the way. Okie dokie. Soon, we had the infamous day of Karen being in an hours-long meeting. Her pager on her desk. Her hubby was at their apartment, playing phone tag with the realtor, waiting for a response to their offer on their dream house. The closed conference door meant do not disturb. Basically, unless your hair was on fire or the woman next to you was in labor, do not disturb. The D&D rule was set by Karen, as she didn't like interruptions for what she called petty reasons, such as someone landing a big account, etc. Karen gave me to different papers to fax, every step of the way. Remember? So, hey Karen, it's OP, just want you to know I noticed your request and I'll go to the fax machine now. Hey Karen, it's OP, just want to let you know I've stood up and I'm heading to the fax machine right now. Hey Karen, it's OP, just want to let you know that I faxed the paper to the first company. I'm back at my desk now, and after a sip of coffee I'll go back to the fax machine and do the second one. Hey Karen, it's OP, just to let you know, someone else was using the fax machine, so I had to wait. Hey Karen, it's OP, just to let you know that while waiting for the fax machine to be free I walked down the hall to use the bathroom. Hey Karen, it's OP, just to let you know, I'm back at my desk, and I'm getting ready to stand up again and go to the fax machine. I called her when I stood up, walked to the fax machine, used the ladies' room, took a sip of coffee, sat her day back down, went back to get the confirmation reports, etc. I also marked each voicemail as urgent. Her voicemail box was soon full, and there was no way of her hubby to get through to her for her to okay the final offer to the house, which was higher than the asking price. She didn't have a cell phone, and this was way before texting, and she left her pager on her desk. The door was shut, so nobody could disturb for any reason. Her own rule. Nobody could get a message to Karen, so she wasn't able to get back to her hubby. Someone else bought the house, and although I wish I could say it was my hubby and me, Karen and her hubby were devastated. She asked me why I didn't get her when he tried to call, and I reminded her that we couldn't have personal calls during work hours. A few months later my hubby got a job transfer and we moved again, this time to a different state. About 10 years ago I joined Facebook and soon friended my old boss and a few former co-workers. I found out that after I left, Karen lost her punching bag and, combined with the stress of losing the house of her dreams, she and her hubby soon separated. She left the company, and nobody knows what happened to her or her marriage. I've searched for people by her name in the state where we work together, and then did a general search for her name. Unfortunately, she has a very common name, so it's hard to narrow it down. She wanted me to do something that wasn't my job and wanted to know what I did every step of the way. So I did. Have a staff meeting knowing I can't attend and give me the worst shift possible. Then I'll quit, but I won't notify you. Okay, so not really sure if this belongs here or not. If not, let me know and I'll remove it. This happened many moons ago, like 20 years. So I used to work in a restaurant as a hostess and part-time busser for tips. I always took the weak sections other bussers didn't like because they were less busy, and running dish tubs killed my back. But someone has to take those sections, right? Might as well be me. Win-win. I was a hostess for 4 days and I bussed for 1. The manager of the hostesses was okay, but she was kind of a jerk sometimes. A little bit of backstory. One night someone puked in the women's restroom. The hostess manager asked me to clean it up. I told her sorry, I'm not qualified for that. She gave me a blank look and said, excuse me, go clean it. So I told her that I have not been trained in the proper disposal of bodily waste, and that it's against OSHA's rules to handle said waste without the proper training. She was PO'd, but she knew I was right. So she made a different hostess clean it up and glared daggers at me the rest of the night. I think the hostess manager was miffed about the above incident and slightly had it out for me. The hostess schedule used to be random and everyone would get varied shifts opening. Mid, closing. Nobody liked closing because the closing shift had to clean everything. Hostess manager suddenly decides that the hostess crew is going to go to fixed shifts. Now, I was in a play in college so could only work certain hours. She had the staff meeting during hours I couldn't attend. I wasn't even informed of the meeting. She then assigned everyone a permanent shift. Guess what shift I got? Yup, closing. This is where the possible malicious compliance comes in. So, like most jobs, you're required to give a 2-week notice if you're going to quit. Plus, it's a good thing to do if you don't want them trashing you to your future employer. So I gave my notice to the manager of the busing staff. I figured as long as I gave it to a manager, it didn't matter who. They all belonged to the same company and worked together. Plus, I didn't want to see the hostess manager since I was ticked at her. Apparently, the busser manager never shared my notice with the hostess manager. My next scheduled shift after my 2 weeks was up, I get an angry call from her. "Why aren't you here, or why isn't there a replacement here for you if you're sick?" We were required to call every coworker to try to cover our shift if we couldn't make it. Sometimes, if we couldn't find anyone, they'd still try to make us come in. I told her I don't work there anymore. I gave my notice. She said, "No, you didn't. I never received it." I told her I gave it to the other manager. She tried telling me that I had to give one to her too, and that since I didn't, then she would count me as a no-call, no-show, and note in my employee file that I was fired. But I argued the hell out of that one, and she finally dropped it. I also called the busser manager to talk to him about it, and he laughed and told me not to worry about it, that it was all good. I always wondered if maybe he didn't like her either. Not a total in-your-face take that kind of moment, but it sure made me feel good that she now had to scramble to fill my position. The funny thing is, all the hostess staff knew I was leaving because I told them when it was my last day, etc. None of them said a word to her. In case anyone is concerned, there were usually 4 to 5 hostesses on shift, so my absence didn't impact them too terribly much. I saw some of them later and they said they didn't hold it against me at all. It just made their nights less boring since there was less downtime. I'm not interviewing, I work here. I never knew these subs existed, so I'm glad to know I have a place to share my experiences. A few years ago I had worked for the company for over 5 years as a database administrator, DBA, and team lead for the database group. Over the previous year had been working remotely, so a few of the newer hires on the other teams in IT don't know me by sight. We recently needed to hire a few more developers for the web team. I had made it known to the management team that we need more developers with SQL experience, so the decision was made that I would sit in on the interviews rather than the others on my team. The day for the interview comes around and I'm in my office. I print out the resume for today's contestants. I'm the first to show up at the conference room with printouts in hand and have a seat. About 2 minutes later, a junior web developer and a business analyst walk in. Since I've never met them before, I stood up to shake their hands and introduce myself. Before I can say who I am, they start in. The cast, BIA, business analysis, dev, junior web developer. Me equals me. BIA, a little underdressed for an interview. Me, huh? I'm in blue jeans and polo, normal attire for the office. Dev, that's okay. Do you have copies of your resume? Me, yeah, I have the one. Not yet catching on. BIA, wow, you people are never prepared. Me, excuse me. BIA, how do you expect to get hired if you dress like that and don't bring copies of your resume? Me, I think I see the problem. Dev, cuts me off. I think you are the problem. I'm sorry, but I'm going to have to ask you to leave. We're canceling your interview. My mouth drops open. Me, holding up my work ID, do you know what this is? BIA and Dev mouths fall open and all they could say, Me, yes, that's right. I work here. Now that I have your attention. Like I was trying to say, I'm the DBA, I've worked here for 5 years. I know we've never met, but if this is how you treat future employees, I'll have to chat with. Development manager's name. Dev, but I am sorry, can we start over, please? I do have a sick sense of humor, so I realize that I now have ammunition for years to come. About 2 minutes later, the development manager shows up with the first contestant, the actual interviewee, and the games begin. I did have a little chat with the development manager about what happened, and we had a great laugh about it. Every time I had a meeting with those two, I always hold up my badge and announce that I still work here. If you made it to the end of the video, thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe and share, and we will see you in the next video.